Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarcia Smith, and welcome back to another journey and another story. Before we get started, real quick, you guys already know, like, subscribe, share, do all the things on Instagram, YouTube, all the places, do all the things. All right, now we have all of that out of the way. Family, I am so excited to have Mr. Rob Scheer in the building. Hello, Rob.
My friend, how are you?
I'm good.
So nice
Okay.
to meet
For those of you that don't know, this man is a legend. And he's probably not even going to see. Look, he's turning red already. This man is a legend. His story is incredible, and we're going to get into it as much as he wants to tell us because he also has a phenomenal book called A Forever Family. So I'm going to dive right in, Rob.
Let's do it.
Let the people know. I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to go backwards. How old were you when you entered the foster care system?
Wow, what a question. I was aware of the system as even younger than when I went in the system because my brothers and sisters had already started falling to the wayside. I'm actually the youngest of 10 kids. And so social workers were already coming into our home. I was dealing with teenage pregnancy with my siblings, drug addiction, incarceration. And then at the age of 12, they finally put me there. And so, yeah, I was 12 years old. And the crazy part is people have to understand the definition of foster care.
Ooh.
So I grew up in foster care in the early 70s when foster care was defined as any child who was not living with their parent of origin. And that's still actually the definition of children in foster care. Who is a foster child? It's a child who is not living with their parents of origin. And that's the way it happened to me. I wasn't living with my parents because of the abuse that I suffered from the hands of my biological father.
Okay, so now I'm going to go backwards. Oh. In your book, you start right there.
Yeah.
I was like,
right there.
Right there.
Right
And
there.
you were young. I was amazed at how young you were and you remembered that. So, can you share a little bit about
So
that?
the crazy thing is I remember when my memoir was being requested for me to write my memoir. And by the way, I'm a banker by trade. I grew up in foster care. I became a very successful businessman. I owned mortgage companies throughout this country. Being a nonprofit, a public speaker, an author, those things were not even in my vocabulary.
Not on the bingo card.
No. The only thing I had on my bingo card, and I had put it on my card when I was a little boy, was to be a dad.
Be a dad.
That was it. That was the only thing that I knew for a fact that I was going to accomplish no matter what obstacle was put in front of me, no matter what cards were delivered to me, I was going to be a dad. So when I started this book out, I remember asking my biological sister, am I getting this right? Because you have to understand, people's memoirs is their memories. These were my memories. But at the same time, even though half of my siblings are deceased and, I couldn't tell you where anybody is, in that younger generation where I was, but I just knew I wanted to be as authentic as possible. So the earliest memory I have is my sister Fran waking me up and hiding me in the field because my father was on another one of his drunken rampage. And I'm 59 years old, and every day I'm reminded of that man because of the cigarette scars I have from him putting cigarettes out on me as a little boy. But
Let me ask you a quick question though. It's so interesting that you knew you wanted to be a dad when the role model, well, quote unquote, role model that you had was not very fatherly.
But
Why?
because I remember my neighbor, and I remember that the man who lived across the street had kids, and I remember he was always in the front yard playing with his boy. He was throwing the ball with his boy. He was washing the car with his boy. He was always doing something with his kid. And I never had that. I never, even when I was in foster care, no one ever threw a ball to me. I was never allowed to go into sports. I never got to do the curricular activities. There were no big birthday parties, and none of that stuff happened as I saw it happening to the kid across the street. And I knew that when I got old enough and was able to make those choices for a kid, I was going to make the right choices.
That's incredible that you even wanted to do that. The home life was, y'all go get this book because that life of his in the beginning was wild.
It's something that I think about quite often. What was given to me in the beginning of my life was given to me because someone knew that I could take it. And people ask me all the time, how did I make it? My brothers and sisters didn't. How did I make it? And I know this sounds cliche, and I know that there are people that reach out to me and are like, how could you say that? I know how I felt, and I made it because of my faith. My faith. I truly believed as a young boy, and even when I was homeless, I would sit in this bathroom. I used to sleep in this bathroom at night when I was homeless as a senior in high school. And it was the local taco place, and they would keep the outside bathroom door unlocked so I could sleep there at night. And I remember even as a young boy, 18 years old, senior in high school, couldn't even tell you the last time I'd taken a shower. But I remember staring in the mirror, and it was 3 in the morning maybe, because you didn't sleep really. And I just remember saying that, you got this, you got this. And people ask me where my grit came from. It came from my Heavenly Father. And I don't know who He is, and I don't know what He is. And I don't know if there are, pathways of gold, and I don't know if there's a gate, and I don't know if people are flying around with wings. The only thing I know is that the passion that I put in my life here is going to benefit my life after.
Rob, my gosh. And again, that is incredible that you even had that, because it's like you had these things. You didn't have those types of role models, but something was on the inside of you, because I believe you had to go through what you had to go through because it was for somebody else. You had work to do. You just didn't know it.
Yeah.
You just didn't know it.
Yeah. I could see
So,
that.
yeah, you just touched on being a senior in high school. And something that you talk about in your book is also being a senior in high school and then at 18 finding yourself homeless with a trash bag.
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. I wasn't expecting that, by the way. I wasn't expecting that I was going to be the token homeless kid in the town. I just wasn't one of those kids. I went to a high school that had a smoking area. I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, and um, I just I wasn't one of those kids. I got good grades, and I said yes ma'am and no sir, and I went to church every Sunday, and I got really good grades. And I to say that I was going to be the homeless kid eating out of the trash can, that just wasn't, even though I knew that my life was so messed up, and that, I didn't have my mom and dad, and I had these other people that I were calling mom and dad, and they had kids that, were my siblings, but they weren't my siblings. And, they went on vacation and I didn't go, and all of those things. I just wanted to be a normal kid. I wanted to get an education. I wanted a future. I didn't expect to be homeless, but that's what my path led me.
I want to ask you, because I myself am an educator, how did those teachers respond? Like they had to know something is not right here. And I know we're talking about a different era.
Yeah.
'Cause I know
No,
things are a little
no.
different right now.
So I write about it in my book. I actually write about a particular teacher who would bring extra food, a particular teacher who always knew when I needed that extra smile. I remember she would be in the front of the class, and she would turn and she would look at me, and I need, and I found out years later, but I was like, she was just, it was her and I in the room, and she was the most amazing teacher, by the way. And I remember when I graduated high school, I left that town. I never went back. And it wasn't until my book was being published and Simon and Schuster and Jeter Publishing was like, we're going to send you on a book tour and we're sending you back to your hometown. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I was like, I haven't been back to that hometown since I left when I was 18. I was like, the memories that are, and by the way, I will tell you, I doubled up on my therapy that week that I was going to be going to my hometown. But I took my rock, which is my husband. I took my sister. And I remember when we pulled up to the shopping center where the Barnes and Noble was, and there were people just standing in line. And I said to my agent, I said, what are all these people here for? She was like, they're here for you. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, they're here for you to sign their book. And I was like, this is crazy. So I go into the Barnes and Noble. I sit down at this table and people start coming up and they're like, they're going, Robert. First of all, I knew they didn't know me because nobody calls me Robert. They stopped calling me Robert when I was a senior in high school. When I left that town, I changed my name to Rob. I went
Okay.
from Robert to Rob. I never wanted to hear Robert ever again to me. But, you know, they just kept coming up. And then finally, I heard her. And she said, Robert, I always knew you would amount to something. And I looked up, and there she stood, Mrs. Bowley, my teacher, and she was crying. She's probably in her 70s. And there was a friend of mine with her, my friend Michelle. We've been friends since sixth grade. And Michelle had found Miss Bowley and told Miss Bowley, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Rob has written a memoir and he's coming to Manassas and he's going to sign his book. And so Miss Bowley came there. And as she was crying, she said, we always knew you were homeless. We just didn't know what to do. You didn't know what
Educators
to do.
know. Educators know. We
Yeah.
see it and we do as much as we can do. Yeah.
And by the way, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. The thing is that I tell people all the time, you cannot blame people that are not educated. Simple as that. You can't blame people that aren't educated. And they were not educated about kids like me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we have to do with this podcast, with society. We must educate our public about kids in foster care. First of all, people need to understand we are not the problem within your community. You created us. As your gangs grow, as you see the turmoil within the street, you better believe you need to look at us because we actually represent close to 80% of death row inmates, kids in foster care. We fill those detention centers. Why? You've given us no other avenue because you're not educated about us. You think we're the problem, we're troubled kids, but the fact is we're in a system because of another adult made a decision. Simple as that.
Simple as that. Wow, wow, wow. Whew. Okay. I want to ask a question about what you just said as far as the public being educated. What do you think is most missed when, like you said, you have these kids? He's like, don't get me started. I saw the look. Okay, if you could give me two things that you think are the most, what are they missing?
Yeah. I think number one, that people are so uneducated about the fact of what type of kids are in foster care. First of all, we need to understand that the majority of kids in foster care are white. They look like me. Now, I will tell you that the actual racial divide within foster care is so unacceptable. But people think that this is an inner city black community type of situation, and it's not that. Foster care was started on the backs of white kids, okay? So let's get that one straight, first of all. Secondly, what we need to understand is that people come into foster care because of two reasons. Number one, you abused your kid, okay? Perfectly should go. Kids need to go in. I have kids I have adopted who were abused, definitely. But then you have kids, number two, who come into the system because we define one word, neglect, and that word is
Yes.
defined no more than poverty. It's poverty. I will tell you that I have two kids that I worship my kids, but they should have never, ever come to foster care. When a child enters foster care, you must look in the mirror and accept the fact you have got your failure because you failed. You failed when a kid comes into the system. First of all, let's all listen and be careful what we all learn here. Our forefathers, they actually built communities for one reason, and it wasn't for your bushes to match. It was for us to take care of each other. And if we are not taking care of our children, what are we doing? I mean, let's be real. I mean, Nelson Mandela said it clearer than anybody. We in society are judged by the way we treat our kids. That's how we're judged. And people need to understand kids in foster care, they don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They belong to us. To us. And the way that we treat them, we deserve an F.
As my middle school kids say, clock that.
I've gotten that a couple times today, by the way. This is like my third interview, and I've had 3 schools that I visited today, and I got a lot of that. So I
Middle
know
school
what that
kids
is.
definitely say that all the time.
Yeah, I love it. I love
So
it.
you touched on, because I was going there, the children that you have adopted,
My babies.
your babies, the way you talk about your babies.
Oh my
So
gosh. My babies are behind me on the wall.
I see them. I
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah.
So the first set of babies,
Yeah. My beautiful, beautiful
Beautiful
daughter.
bit.
Yeah, yeah, my
She's
daughter
so
Amaya and
beautiful.
my son Makai.
Okay, the story that I was most intrigued by, there was a lot, but the thing that really caught my eye, her name coming into the system. They were just calling her whatever they wanted to call her, or they shortened it.
She didn't say anything.
She didn't say
She didn't say
anything.
anything. And so let me tell you a full circle moment though for me. So, names are so important. Birthdays are so important. There's so many things, milestones within our, life chain that we go through that are important things. But names to me was so, and when I found out that my daughter, here, she'd been with us for a couple of weeks at this point, and we're calling her Maya and Maya this and Maya that. And I'm not even kidding you. My mother-in-law actually gave Amaya and Makai each a blanket. So when Amaya and Makai came to us, President Obama was being sworn in as our very first Black president. My husband and I lived in D.C. We were like unbelievably grateful that here we have President Obama as our president, and these beautiful kids come to our home, and I'm like Maya, Maya, Maya. My mother-in-law makes a blanket. She puts Maya and Makai on each one. By the way, Makai's name was spelled wrong when he arrived in our home.
I believe it.
And so when I found out that her name was Amaya and not Maya, but
Let me
then
tell you what I appreciated about that. Maya and Maya, I think to anybody, they probably would have looked over that. I so appreciated you going, Maya is your name.
Maya. And so crazy, I was going to say full circle moment. My daughter's now 21, but I want to say about a year ago, somebody said Maya, and I was like, and she was like, "Oh, that's what they call me now." I was like, "What?" I was like, "I've worked this whole entire time to make sure that you're Maya, and now all of a sudden you're like nicknaming." And she changed her name in my phone, like when I text her, and I replied back, I
I
was like,
love
"No,
that.
no, 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 baby girl." I was like, "That'll do a lot," but that name is yeah. So my beautiful, and then close almost 3 months later, my boys arrive. My baby.
Wait. Hold on. I got to get to the next, her sibling. Wait. Come back to me, Rob. Come back. The sibling had, I work with special needs children. So I so appreciated how diligent you and your husband were to finding out what was wrong. So now we can know what to do, because the system was so ready to just be like, please talk about that.
Yeah, I mean the problem is the system is ready to do that every day with kids. They stick all these labels on them. They all have some type of, IEP of some sort that's a mile long.
Gonna get me
And
started.
and that's what they did with my son. And, they brought him to us. They told us he probably was never going to talk. Well, no, first of all, they told us he was never going to talk.
Well,
And they said he probably would not walk properly without braces on his legs. And, I look at this young man who, by the way, in a couple of days is going to be 19 years old.
how?
And, I remember when he was 5 and they told us that this was probably the most we were going to get from him, and that we should consider maybe institutionalizing him. And I just remember looking and saying, you definitely don't know the Shears, because we never say never. And I was even more determined at that point to make sure that people saw who I saw was this bright, intelligent, caring, kind, big heart boy who just wanted somebody to believe in him. And my husband and I did. And we
And
believed in
you
him
did.
every minute of the day. And now I look at this young man who is truly making his mark. He's received almost a full scholarship to college. He's studying cybersecurity and public speaking. He spoke to over 300 people in his first public speaking event. This kid is amazing. He's my son as well. Phenomenal kid. And by the way, you would never ever know that this kid had fetal alcohol syndrome. You would never ever know that this kid started out in the path he did. He is just the most. He inspires me every single day to be a better human than I was yesterday.
So I want you to inspire any foster parent or adoptive parents that's listening right now, and they have that child that you had once upon a time, and they are ready to hang it up,
Let me
throw
tell you
in the
something.
towel.
I get so many emails that criticizes me because I'm very vocal. As a parent, let's be honest, you do not like your kids all the time. You don't. And by the way, they don't like you all the time either. And that's okay. I say to my kids, the thing is that you don't like dad all the time, and that's quite all right. I'm not here to be your friend. But what I do want you to always know is that no matter what you do, no matter what goes on within you, this space where your dads are will always be your space. They will always be that place for you. Kids need to know how it is to be loved unconditionally. See, I didn't get that. I grew up thinking if the shoe drops, I'm gone to the next house. And
Mhm.
that's the way kids feel in foster care. And I want my kids, our kids, to know that no matter what, and by the way, I got 5 of them, all from this system. They all, and I've had the emails, stop with the emails that, oh, I only got babies. No, I did not. My husband and I adopted an 18-year-old. We've dealt with the gambit of ages. And so I just know that for me, gosh, that boy is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the first two are siblings.
Yep. Maya Mackay.
Then we get a second set that your husband was thrilled about at first.
No, it was so crazy. It was like, and the craziest thing is my husband, my husband is a saint, by the way. We've been together over 20 years. My husband, he just, he gave up his. I remember when we were dating, he was just like all about his masters and all about his career. And he was very career driven, like I am. But as soon as those babies came to the house, it was totally different for him. It was like he did the work thing for about a year, and then he was just like, I can't do this. He's like, I want to get up in the morning and not rush to daycare, but make them breakfast and walk them to the bus stop. And I want to go on field trips. And, I want to be there when they get home and help them with their homework. And I want to volunteer to be the class parent. And I
Yeah.
remember looking at Reese and saying, listen, but this isn't for me. You know, um, I love kids, but I love my career. And I said, but listen, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. So my husband literally quit his job and he's been a stay-at-home dad for 15 years and loves it. And by
And
the way, he
that's
does it so great.
and that's because out the gate before you got the second two, Makai was his baby from jump.
Yeah. And
From
one time we had 4 of them in diapers. Yeah. So 3 months later, Tristan and Grayson show up. They're 2 and 6 months, and so all of a sudden we had 4 kids under the age of 4 in diapers.
how?
So Maya came to us. She wasn't potty trained,
How?
even though
Yeah, I
she was
figured
4.
that. I
Yeah,
figured that
even
from the
though she was 4,
situation when
she
you described
still
the situation. I was like, she's not probably trained.
yeah, she wasn't potty trained. And so, but it didn't take her time long at all. But yeah, no, we had 4 diapers and we were just like, I'm not even kidding you. We went from these 2 guys living in DC in this beautiful brownstone, having cocktail parties, going to the mayor's house for dinner, to all of a sudden we were 2 dads with 4 kids and there were toys everywhere. And I have OCD really bad. And my husband was so worried about that. But I was like, it doesn't bother me anymore. And it doesn't.
Wow. Yeah, the from the life that you guys were living to that is quite the jump.
Big jump. Big
Quite the
jump.
jump. And I want to touch on this because again, when your beautiful daughter was featured in the magazine,
Oh,
the heat that came with that because she has dads.
2 dads. Yep. Two
And
dads.
I can only imagine that's not the only time you've got that heat, that smoke.
No, we get it all the time.
I'm
And
sure.
it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since my
Mhm.
daughter was named the American Girl, and was in the American Girl magazine. And those million moms, and by the way, if those million moms are listening or if anybody knows them, give them a hug for me. Tell them I said thank you because all that hate that you gave made our organization grow. Grow. You did exactly what I wanted you to do.
The
You throw
plant.
out hate, and I will tell you, flowers will bloom. And that's exactly what
That's
happened.
exactly what happened. I got chills reading that. I said, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
Because you were just initially you were doing something for Christmas. You were packing up some bags. Let's do a little more than some toys. That's literally what it was. And what it is, well, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Hold on, hold on. If you have if you have same sex couples right now listening and they want to adopt or they're fostering, what is your message to them? Because the smoke is coming.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, so when my husband and I decided to start this journey, we didn't know any other gay people that had kids. We had never ever met anybody that had adopted out of foster care. We didn't have any gay couples that were having kids by Sarah. We didn't know anybody like that. And by the way, I'd lived in DC my whole life, and my husband is from Kansas. And so, we had a large group of people, but nobody that was gay that had this journey. So I do believe that we had molded so much of our what we went through. But I tell people who today, if you're considering to build your family, that first is a first step. Secondly, decide how you want to build it. And by the way, there's no wrong way. If you do surrogate, or if you adopt through foster care, or you do an overseas adoption, or just understand that that's your story. That's your journey. It doesn't matter. And to me, I didn't really want to adopt out of foster care because I was scared
Mhm.
what it was going to happen. How stupid was I? It was my husband who grew up with the total classic family. I mean, they were a Leave It to Beaver family if you ever saw one. His parents married 50 some years. They grew up in the Midwest. I mean, come on. But yeah, no, I wouldn't trade a thing in the world. And matter of fact, didn't trade it enough that in 2019, my husband and I took in our fifth child. So yeah. And by the way, if you read my book, we don't get to talk about Alex in our book. And so
No.
that's been, something that I've actually had a lot of struggle with that since Alex came into our life, because there's so much that's happened prior to Alex that still gets a lot of media coverage, that I always want to remind people that, you know what? We now have a fifth child, and his story is just as impactful. And, his journey with us is just unbelievably incredible. But he's an amazing big brother.
But what's so interesting about him is that he certainly was not a baby when you adopted him. Please tell the people how old he was when you adopted him.
So we actually adopted him when he was 20, but he actually came to live with us when he was 18. I met him in 2019 giving a talk. Actually, it was 2018. It was the fall of 2018. I had come back from the West Coast on a speaking tour, and my assistant was like, "Hey, you need to go to this high school in our hometown and in Montgomery County, Maryland, and give a talk." It's like, I'm exhausted. And she was like, you promised me you'd never say no to a school. And I was like, and she's been with me for 17 years, and she's right. And so I walked into this school and I told my story, the story that some of the story I shared with you. And a young boy walked up to me. And 3 months later, we asked him to move in with us. And a year after that, he asked us to adopt him. And we did. And so my son is now 24 years old. When he came to us, he'd been in 11 homes, 6 schools, and he was a typical kid from the system. And nobody was giving him any attention. Nobody was realizing that he was going to be such an incredible giver to society. And Reese and I saw it. And I remember the judge asking me, why would I do this? And I reminded the judge, as I reminded your listeners and viewers, number one, you do not have to know someone to love someone. You don't. But the thing is that every single child deserves a foundation. Every child deserves to know there's someone there rooting them on. But what I think we miss is that we do not make sure that every single child feels what unconditional love feels like. And you have to listen to this. Those who are fostering, adopting, you got your own kids. I don't care. Unconditional love will mold your children's future. And let me explain to the reason why. When you love someone unconditionally, they can do whatever in your eyes and they still know they're loved. And that will
Mm.
help them not make those decisions to do the things that they shouldn't do, because they're not, you know, for me, my kids are not constantly struggling with, is they going to love me? Are they going to, because we've instilled that from the very beginning that, listen, there is nothing, and I do mean nothing, that you can do that I'm ever going to stop being your father. Now, I'm not going to like it. I have a kid that's been incarcerated. Did I like it? No. Did I visit him? Hell yes. Did I contact him? You better believe it. Was I proud of him? Not when he made those mistakes that he made, But was I proud because he went through what he went through and came out on the other end, with a total, you better believe it. And by the way, he's my son. And I don't want him to ever be ashamed of what he went through, because that's all about learning through life.
I love that you said not only adoptive parent and foster parents, just parents
Parents.
need that lesson. Yeah.
And by the way, people need to stop with all these labeling things.
Ooh.
I mean, first of all, there's no reason for us to not be able to change our vocabulary. We were able to, you don't ever, you might hear some people, but very few people ever say, oh, look at that homeless man. What we now have been practiced to say is, look at that man who's experiencing homelessness. Okay? These are children who are experiencing foster care. When I say children, your heart immediately starts to get a little warm. It all does. Whenever you say children, you're automatically, I get a little goosebumps. But if I say foster children, you think, I wonder what they did. I wonder how their trauma is. I bet they speak back to the parents, and I bet that they're uncontrollable because they're foster children. Yeah. Why don't we just say what they are? They're children. They're children who are experiencing foster care. Foster care doesn't define them. We've allowed it to define them. That is the reason we have the outcomes that we have, because immediately we have started them out as foster child, which means you're going to go down that road, and that road's going to lead you to all the problems that you've given us, or you're going to be a child who
Children.
wants to do everything, and you
So
just happen to be experiencing foster care.
children that are experiencing foster.
Experiencing foster care. It's something that we are adamant at Comfort Cases, that we try to change the narrative. It's something that, it's taken us time. Come on. Old habits are hard to break.
Yeah.
They are. But you have to make a conscious effort. And you have to make a conscious effort because there's a group of individuals that truly deserve it. And those are our children. Our children in foster care truly deserve it. When you see the statistics that we see across our country, come on, we have a system that is beyond broken. Stop saying it's broken. This is the issue I say about that. I say it to my kids all the time. If something is broke, bring me the super glue. I'll put it together and it'll be fine. If something is shattered, it has to be rebuilt. The foster care system in the United States of America is shattered. Shattered. That means that we need to come to the table and start the new blueprint. But what we need to learn is that blueprint must come from the mistakes that we made in our past.
Gosh. Rob, jeez. Okay. Comfort Cases. Talk about quite the program.
Wow.
When I started following you, I was like, my gosh, you have inspired me to do something that I've never done before. I have the Black Adoptees Meetup.
Uh-huh.
And you inspired me to do a duffel bag, and I call them comfort bags.
Yes.
And I literally, yesterday was the last day they could purchase them.
Oh.
And the way the community responded, my church responded, my sorority sisters responded.
We love those sorority women. They are big supporters of our organization. We love those sorority ladies.
I said, if you just ask, like the Bible says, yeah, the people will respond.
And by the way, what's the worst thing they're going to say? No?
No.
I mean, come on. No? So what?
Yes.
Go to the next person. They'll say yes. With our organization, first of all, I said it to you before. I'm a banker by trade. I had no thought in my mind having
That was my mind, by the way.
I never thought, I come from the .com world. I'm a taker. Being in the .org world where we're givers was something new for me. And 13 years ago, when we started Comfort Cases, it was never starting Comfort Cases so Rob would run a nonprofit. It was to start Comfort Cases to teach our children that their legacy is about what they give and not what they take. That was my key thing when it came to our organization. And we've had some cases. Little would I know in 13 years, as a 96% volunteer ran organization, we have packed and delivered over 285,000 cases. We have delivered these backpacks to all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico. And by the way, I don't need to remind all your smart viewers and listeners, Puerto Rico belongs to us. Yes, it's surrounded by water, but so is Hawaii. See, The thing is that I truly do believe, as we talked about this in the beginning, it's education.
Education.
We went and we educated our community about kids carrying trash bags. There were people who said, "Are you crazy? Kids
I'm
carry
telling
trash
you,
bags?"
when I told people, they were like, "Really?"
Yep. Yeah, we get that all the time. Are you seriously a trash bag? And I'm like, yep. And so now you look, and we've now in 2021, my husband and I, we opened up a center in the UK where we serve 84,000 children in the United Kingdom. We are getting ready in 2026 to open up a center in Toronto where we'll serve over 60,000 kids in foster care within Canada. So the thing is that I tell people all the time that, take your pain and make it into a purpose, but also always realize is that how people succeed in life is by forgiveness, by forgiveness. And people must understand the forgiveness is not for the other person. The forgiveness is for you to take the power within yourself to make you be able to move forward. That is the true part of forgiveness.
So comfort cases, because I want to come and pack up some bags, but I live in
Sure.
Florida.
Where are you at in Florida?
I'm in Orlando.
Oh, I was just there. I was just there giving a talk. But I'm in Florida all the time. And by the way, there's opportunities, so we'll keep in touch. I come
We
to
have to
Orlando and
keep
pack
in
backpacks all the
touch
time. At least
so
two or
we
three
can.
times a year, we're in Orlando packing backpacks. So yeah, you
We
better
have
believe
to
it.
absolutely keep in touch. And I mentioned it earlier. How you started this though was it was not this was it was not this. And I say that because so many of us start things thinking one thing. For me, it's this podcast. It was not this.
Yeah.
I was going to just tell my little adoption story and be done. And I always say, when you tell God your plans, he's so entertained.
Let me tell you, I get it. I get it. This was not on my. And by the way, I have the podcast. I have a podcast as well, and I will not forget when I started my podcast. My team was like, "Oh, you got to do a podcast." I was like, oh, just And then I was like, oh my gosh. And now I'm in my seventh season and I'm like, this is incredible. But what I love, and I don't know if you get, I love the fact of when I get people email me and say that they learned something by that guest. Or when I get, and I have a lot of nonprofits on my podcast because I'm trying to get nonprofits to work together. And so I had them on my podcast because I'm always like, listen, it's our responsibility to lift each other up, and people will reach out and they'll be like, I didn't know that nonprofit existed. And I was like, exactly, but we need to show the love.
Yes. And that's why another reason I'm so glad that to be speaking to you. Number one, to let my viewers know, introduce you to my viewers. And number two, to introduce comfort cases because it's so the work that you do, the story that you have, your beautiful children, your husband, everything, all encompassing. It's so important. The work is so important. I want to ask one final question.
You got it.
If you had one thing, I know you have all the things to say, but one thing to say to that little child that is experiencing foster care, if they so happen to be listening, what's your message?
I would want that young person who is experiencing foster care to know that they're not forgotten, that as a community, we haven't given up on them. As a community, we believe in them. As a community, I truly am one person that they can look in that mirror and say, there's a guy who's gray and old and he loves me. Because guess what? I do. I do. Because I'm a true believer that you do not have to know someone to love someone. You don't. And I love every single one of these kids that are in our system, every kid who's experienced foster care, every kid who's aged out of foster care, every kid who's living it every single day right now and feeling like there's no light for them. I am telling you, there is light. There's light. You just have to go for it. Go for it.
Listen, family, I need you to go get the book. I got my copy right here. A Forever Family by Rob Scheer. Or you can listen to it on Audible. Either do
Which
both.
is my voice.
And I love it. I love listening to books, and the author has narrated it.
That was crazy, by the way. When they called me and told me that my audiobook was going to come out, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Who's going to read it? And they were like, you? I was like, what? I was like, yeah, that was
Mm,
crazy. That
that's
I also
that's.
doubled my therapy up during that too.
But you know what's so good about that? Because it's your story. So the
It's
way
my
you
story.
read it,
My story.
he pulls you in from page one. Listen, 1 minute in, and then he bounces back and forth. So I was like, wait, what happened next? Oh, I got to get through this chapter. And then by the end of that chapter, I'm like, well, what happened next? Oh, we're back here. It's incredible how he wrote this book.
Thank you.
It's intentional, and just go get the book. And like I told you earlier, I am so honored to have the legend, Rob Scheer,
Gosh, you're
on
gonna
the
make me
Adoption
cry.
Journey podcast.
First of all, I love you and
Thank
I know
you.
exactly who you are. I know about your podcast. And so, when David said that I was going to be on your podcast, I was a little giddy too. So, and that's why when like I was trying to log on, I was like, "Oh my gosh, please don't let her cancel on me. I got to get through here." So, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing something that we all should be doing, and that's talking about the difference that we are, but also the similarity that brings us together. And when it comes to adoption, I remind this to people all the time, and don't ever allow someone to think differently. You have an actual life book that started prior to your adoption. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell my kids that I want them to absolutely wrap their arms around the life story prior to their adoption and embrace it. I don't expect them to understand it all, but I want them to know that things happened prior to them coming to us. I don't want people to think that we came in on this white horse and saved a bunch of kids. That is not what happens at all. And if anything happened, I can tell you, my kids saved me. My kids saved me.
And on that note, Rob, don't leave me, but hold on. On that note, bye, family.